Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to another fine Wednesday morning. Welcome to another coffee break chat. I'm your host, James Jackson, he, they pronouns, executive producer, Light Thief Productions. We've got a great show for you today. I'm doing a little housekeeping at the moment. I didn't update my links on my on my posts, so I'm copying and pasting furiously as we're talking, and trying to get the posts up on YouTube or on Twitch and Twitter and Blue Sky, because I don't know, I forget to do things sometimes. Not a big deal. We'll be getting going in a moment here. We've got some cool topics for you today. I hope you'll find interest in all of them. We'll be talking about housing. We'll be talking about Philadelphia disappearing. We'll be talking about Kensington, and we'll be talking about a supernova. And we're also going to be talking a little bit about funding for theater from the federal end, and all of that, and a special guest named Danielle, who, as far as I understand, is a clown and a podcaster. And we're not going to talk bad about clowns or podcasters on this particular episode. So right now we'll bring Danielle on screen. Danielle, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself, your pronouns, what it is you do.
Hey everyone, thanks for the intro, James. I hope y'all won't talk bad about clowns and podcasters because that's exactly what I am. Hey everyone, I'm Danielle. My pronouns are she, they. I am a clown. I'm a writer, I'm an educator, and a recovering arts journalist. The podcast is still my connection to that.
I was gonna say, podcasting about the arts doesn't sound like you've actually recovered as an arts
No, no.
journalist.
And funny enough, I'm probably going to be going back into freelancing in a few months. So I'm not recovering. I'm coming fully back. I'm relapsing, as it
You
were.
just what is it that the word that they use in higher education for when you take an extended vacation for your mental
A
sanity? Yes,
sabbatical.
you just took a
I've been on a sabbatical.
sabbatical. Yes.
Exactly,
Mm.
exactly.
How was your sabbatical? What did you learn? Did you
Mm.
find that it actually helped your process?
I think so. I mean, most of my sabbatical included focusing on my physical theater and clown practice, and sort of making that the focus of my life. And now I'm ready to split the focus again.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So clowning and podcasting and
Mhm.
journaling on uh the arts. I don't do the clowning, so I don't know what that's like. What is it like doing clowning? I understand the concept
Yeah.
somewhat. I'm friends with a lot of clowns.
Mm.
And no, I don't mean they're silly people. I mean they're actual clowns. Um,
Mhm.
what? How does clowning fit into your life? Where did it come into your life?
Yeah. I think a good way to explain what clowning means to me, because it has a lot of different meanings and practices and traditions for different people, but for me, it showed up back when I was living in Chicago. I was still an arts journalist. I was running a theater section of a magazine, and I was doing a feature on circus in Chicago. And I interviewed all the aerialists, the acrobats, just all the different performers in the circus realm. Then I got to the clowns, and none of them had the same thing to say about what clown was and what clown meant to them and what clown meant to the audience. And so I was confused and dissatisfied without having like a linear answer. Um, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go to the monthly clown jams that I know are hosted in Chicago. So I went to one and I had the absolute time of my life. And then I thought to myself, well, for research purposes, I should probably take a 8-week long intensive clown course, which was a dramatic gesture. to do for research purposes. By the end of that 8 weeks, I was in it. I couldn't picture myself doing anything else in my time outside like making money and supporting the capitalist system. Um, what clown meant to me, clown saved me in a lot of ways. Clown made me confront a lot of parts of myself that I was not being honest about. How clown differs for me from other performance forms is that when you are on stage, you are fully vulnerable and incredibly present to whatever happens to you in any moment. Every sound, everything you receive from the audience, from the environment, from yourself is an opportunity to develop a new story, to create a new reaction, to find a new bit. Every single moment that a clown has on stage should be pursued with a lot of pleasure. I used to say pursued with joy, but clowns experience a wide range of very intense emotions, not just joy. So if you're experiencing sadness, it's like the most satisfying sadness. If anger, it's the most satisfying anger. Fear, most satisfying fear. And if it's happiness, it's the biggest happiness you've ever felt. And learning that practice, both from a performance sense and a spiritual sense, allowed me to evolve in a lot of ways, understand about things about myself in a lot of ways that I wasn't willing or ready to admit. It sort of expedited the process of identity uncovering and how I relate to others. And I also just, yeah, I loved connecting with people on stage when I was a clown. When I was performing a role in a play or like doing improv or just like being myself, hosting different variety show nights, it wasn't quite the same feeling. And clown gave me this sort of freedom to really, really, truly look into people's eyes and connect with them on a level that I couldn't find in other performance forms.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What would you say is? I mean, sounds like a silly question. I hope it doesn't come across as silly
No,
as I'm
no, it's
feeling it
okay.
sounding. But what? How is clowning different than other, like performance forms? Like, I mean, even journalism is a performance form. If you
Mm,
look at it, how does clowning inform or differ from your other performance forms?
yeah, I think I think because in some ways clown exists at the border between performance and just real life. When you're an actor on stage playing a character, you are drawing, well, hopefully if you're doing it in a healthy way, you're drawing from like parts of yourself or parts of your experience or emotions that will inform the character you're creating, but it's still a character. You're still hiding behind that character. Um, Improv, I'd say, is also you're sort of creating a narrative. You're creating a character. You're behind that wall still, even if it might be like interacting with the audience, even if it might be like making up things in the moment. Improv still exists in this space of, I don't want to say falseness because it's not falseness, but it's fiction. There we go. It exists in a space of fiction.
Hmm.
um, you're taking on a role. What clown asks you to do is to hold up a mirror not only to yourself but to the audience as well. So more ancient and traditional and indigenous traditions of clowning don't actually have a lot to do with performing as they do with ritual. Um, a fool's role, like if we're talking about like a Hopi native tribe or other native tribes, they would have like sacred fools as part of their rituals.
Hmm.
And those fools, what we might see as clowns, um, would find ways to subvert and change the expectations of what people saw happening in front of them. So, like, for instance, if somebody was like picking up an object that was like supposed to be super sacred, and everyone's like, oh my God, this object is so sacred, the fool might literally like break the object or
Right.
like do something really offensive to it. And then everyone would be like, oh my God, what are you doing? Like, that's their most important object. And then that same fool would like walk over and like pick up a flower like it was the most precious thing in the world.
Right. Right.
So I think that's sort of the difference of the clown. How it differs from being a writer. I mean, it's a
Well, I
completely
mean,
different
you know,
medium.
thinking about the origins of clowning in the fool and jester kind of category,
Yeah,
and you know, using them, that traditional clown type was always to provide a pushback to
yeah,
the dogma or like you know leadership kind of overarching narrative of the whatever you know society they were in, and then
yeah,
if you take that and extend it to journalism, a lot of people would say you know the fourth state's most important job is pushing back against you
mm,
know the leadership, the narrative, whatever, you know, finding the truth, and you know, and also going back again to clowns, you know, a lot of people would say clowns find the truth in what they're clowning about. um
yeah.
so I'm wondering if that's informed your truth seeking in journalism, your ability to challenge, you know, what it is the person you're talking to or how you're talking to them.
Mm. Yeah, I think so. I think that's very insightful. For me, a part of my journalistic practice has always been identifying and recognizing that the truth is multifaceted and depends on what perspective you're looking at it from and what information you have access to and what perspective you have access to. And I think I try to do that in clown as well.
Hmm.
I try to cover as much as I can, all sides of the narrative, knowing that it's actually not possible to do all of that in one go. You're always going to be leaving out a certain part of the story. But that principle, the principle of like this is one view versus this is another view, is important to me.
Yeah.
And I think it definitely has informed my work as a clown. Another thing too I'll say is that my the thing I did the most as a theater journalist was theater criticism, which is very funny. I'll explain why. Um, so I went in Chicago and in Pittsburgh. I did a lot of theater criticism for the local theaters. I mostly focused on reviewing and bringing attention to like more DIY type theater spaces with like less privilege, less resources, less institutional funding because I was like, well, the big boys are already getting all the press they need from the Tribune, the Reader, etc. I would like to support folks that are like just getting off the ground or just don't have that kind of institutional support and are doing some really revolutionary stuff. Um, but in reviewing and evaluating and judging their work, it was very interesting for me to move into the space of clown where I had to take on a non judgmental and at the same time very judgmental approach to my performance. Non judgmental in the sense that I couldn't be on stage judging myself. Like I couldn't be constantly thinking about and worrying about how the audience would perceive me. But something I found that was really fun for me and is still fun for me as a clown is judging how the audience reacts to me actively in real time. And I think it's a source of joy for them too, because they see that judgmental self within them.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
like, if I do something and I'm like trying to entertain them or make them laugh, and then they don't respond the way I want to, I'll get angry with them and be like, "You're so stupid. You were supposed to laugh at that." Like, and then I get the laugh because that's such a human response of like, "I'm trying to entertain you, and you're so dumb you can't see what I'm trying to do here." So it's really funny how the critic shows up in my
I
clown
spend
work.
most of my time doing that reaction off screen. I get off the podcast and I'm like, I'm trying to entertain you people. Why did we only have like 10 live viewers? um, you know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
exactly.
let's talk about your podcast. Please pronounce
Yeah,
it
sure.
because I'm gonna mispronounce it, and I don't want to do that. And then let's talk about doing a podcast about Jewish theater.
Yeah, totally. So this podcast is known as On The Bimah. It was formerly called Theater Schmooze, but I think it was about a year ago now. I wanted to update the name to reflect the intensity and the seriousness of the conversations that we were having. On Theater Schmooze just sounded really, really lighthearted to me.
Mm.
And while some of the conversations were lighthearted, a lot of them got into some really deep stuff. I mean, we're like digging into the intersections of people's identity, like how their intergenerational trauma or current trauma presents itself in their work. And I'm like, this ain't a schmooze. This is a lot bigger than that. And I really liked On The Bima. I brainstormed that particular title with some folks from the Alliance for the Jewish Theater, Gwydion Sullivan and Ali Viterbi in particular. And I really like the way it sounded because when you're going to the Bima in a synagogue, you're about to like speak some truth into the world. You're about to share something really profound and meaningful. And I thought that was a really good title for the podcast.
Um, for those that don't have experience with Jewish culture or Jewish worship, what is the
Yeah.
Bima?
It's essentially means stage. It's like a podium stage.
Hmm.
So that's what it is.
Okay, and then especially with like the Middle Eastern war going on right now,
Yeah.
I have Jewish performance art friends and producer friends who are pulling back from producing
Mm,
anything, talking about anything, talking publicly. Even like I have a friend who literally like is posting really insightful things but won't post them
mm,
publicly because he's being attacked from all sides anytime he says anything. And
yeah.
how does that fit in with producing a podcast on Jewish identity and Jewish theater right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. Fortunately enough, I haven't received any kind of negative feedback so far on continuing to produce the podcast in this time. And I think that's, well, actually, I probably should be getting more. I should be getting more responses to it because I've talked to folks that have very strong anti Zionist views, who have strong Zionist views, who are somewhere in the middle. And they typically have been expressing that on the podcast and talking about how like what's happening in Palestine and the Israeli government and Israel in general has been making them feel. Um, Personally, I've been a lot more vocal about my perspectives on Palestinian liberation in the past few months. And I don't know, I think maybe it's because I surround myself in a community of like-minded people. Or maybe it's because the people that are finding the podcast, they those moments in the podcast don't take up like the majority of the conversation. They come up because they naturally come up because if we're going to be talking about trauma and Jewish identity, sometimes Israel will come up. And
Hmm.
so that'll be like a small part of the conversation, but it's not going to be the whole conversation. It's just like something that's currently on their mind right now. Um, and in terms of like fear, the fear of receiving anti-Semitic remarks, or even like something I've been scared about is getting remarks from my family and friends who don't agree with me, who don't agree that what was happening right now in Gaza is a genocide, and that since the Nakba, things have not, it has never been right. I have family and friends that don't agree about that. And it's been hard to have those conversations in person. I have not had those conversations online with them yet. And I'm waiting for that moment. I'm waiting for that moment to happen when somebody comments something or messages me directly and it's like, I would like to have this out with you. I think I'm ready for it for kind of a messed up reason. When Russia's full scale invasion of Ukraine started several years ago, that since then it's been a pretty dark time. My family's all from Ukraine, and watching that happen, and then watching what happened on October 7th, and then the subsequent onslaught of the Palestinian people has just. I'm like, you know what? Say whatever you want to say to me. It can't possibly be as bad as what all of these people are going through.
Mm,
I'm ready to have that conversation.
right.
Yeah.
It's tough. I think I've been avoiding the conversation with anybody that I know that I wouldn't agree with.
Mm.
Um, even in this format, in the format of online, definitely, it's easy for me to. I don't have any predilection about blocking somebody just because I don't feel like reading their Facebook posts, or because they like say something really that I consider really stupid on a Facebook post,
Yeah.
and I've definitely been in interviews, kind of skirting around the subject. I've brought it. I mean, how do you can't really skirt around like I forget what the death toll is at, but you can't skirt around hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
of people dying in a very short period of time. It's just
Yeah.
not possible. Um, uh, and so I feel like I've wanted to have that conversation, but I also don't know that I can have the conversation,
Yeah.
tying in with identity and local, knowledge of things. As a black person, I identify very strongly with any quote unquote underdog, which, at
Sure.
times has been the Jewish community, and in this particular case happens to be the Palestinian community in Gaza.
Yeah.
The treatment of Jews historically has always been a problem, and then the treatment of Palestinians in the current moment is hugely problematic. And I mean,
Yes.
also as a
Now.
black person, I can't have I can and have had the conversation with other black people of, what are you, stupid? You can't look at this and go, like, this is something that's happening that could and has happened to our community and is ongoing in multiple other communities, and you can't just realize that, like, the phrase none of us is free until all of us free is
Yeah.
true, and just freaking side with the people that are being oppressed no matter what their identity is. Anyway. um
I do think something that is hard for people to hold is that Jews can be experiencing anti-Semitism and oppression in different parts of the world, and also the
and
state of
also,
Israel, which is run by Jewish people, not clarify this for the podcast, not all Jewish people, but like a specific set of Jewish people,
hmm,
is currently oppressing another people. It's possible, and it has frequently happened in history for an oppressed people to oppress another people's.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's almost like, well, it is. I would say the same problem as the descendancy of abuse. The descendancy
Mm,
of abuse happens not just in individuals, but happens in communities as well. And when you have one group ostracized and abused, then the next thing that often happens, and this can be seen throughout U.S. history anyway, is that group then ostracizes and oppresses other groups.
yeah.
I mean, the Europeans that came over to America to start with were coming here because oftentimes they were oppressed. The the Pennsylvania was founded by Quakers, and Quakers, the reason why Pennsylvania was founded by the English king was because he wanted to get rid of the Quakers. He wanted to not only make himself look good by giving a land grant to William Penn, but he wanted to get rid of all the Quakers. The
Mm,
Quakers, had this crazy idea that all people were equal, which really
yeah.
didn't work for the monarchy.
Yeah.
um, and then, all the other peoples that were allowed, that came here because they were being oppressed in their various European countries, then oppressing the natives who were here, and looking down on them. Um, and you had wave after wave of this. I mean, we had waves
Yeah.
of this, with uh, black people being oppressed by poor whites. You had Irish people coming and being oppressed by the existing white population, then being included, and then Italians being oppressed by the existing white population and then being included. And then the only consistent thing is oppression of black people and people of color and Jewish people. For some reason I don't quite get it. But yeah. Um, Anyway, one of the elements of identity, I'm gonna poorly transition out of that into some of today's topics. One of the identities of elements of identity is location. Obviously, we live in Philadelphia. I live in Philadelphia anyway. And it's a city of 1.6 million people. And then for some reason, last Wednesday or Thursday, Facebook just deleted that location. um, if you looked at your profile Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I believe Saturday and Sunday as well.
Mm.
There were no like if you had listed yourself as being from Philadelphia, or if you tried to tag the city of Philadelphia as your location or what have you, it didn't exist. And there was a lot of there wasn't a lot of reporting on it. Philly Mag did a piece on it, which is funny. I posted about it on my personal Facebook. A lot of people posted about it on their personal Facebooks. And then yeah, we our my post and another couple of journalism posts about it got drawn to the attention of Facebook, and they corrected whatever error was going on. And yeah, what is there? Is there a reason? Is there something that this calls to mind for you? Is there some? Is there does this present a problem to you, or is it just like a funny quirk of existence now?
Like these kinds of errors that
Yeah,
happen online.
yeah.
I mean, so my day job currently is in tech.
Mm-hmm.
And I have also heard stories from like friends of mine who work at like the bigger tech companies like Google, where they're like, oh, I accidentally temporarily deleted an entire part of Google's website for 4 days. It's like, whoa, that's wild. I mean, but at the end of the day, I think what it represents to me is that these systems of the internet that we rely so intrinsically on in our everyday lives, we think they're going to be there forever. They're not. They're breakable, they're temporary.
Right?
Yeah, that's to me was what that calls to mind. So like I don't know. Whenever something like that happens, or one of the social media sites goes down, I think like perhaps I should back everything up physically and not just digitally. And I'm talking about like my art in specifics and like photos and things like that. Like I really need to be better about physical documentation and not just digital documentation, because what if one day we don't have access to the internet?
Well,
Goodbye,
and
all
that
my
brings
stuff.
up, yeah, that brings up the there's a lot of efforts in so like I don't know how into photography and media you are, but there's the different formats, you know, there's proprietary formats like PSD, which is a Photoshop file. It's owned by
Yeah.
Adobe. Nobody but Adobe technicians can create a PSD.
Mm,
Nobody has the programming functions to read those PSDs other than Adobe technicians. Same thing with like CR2 is a Canon photography format for photo files. You can't just read a CR2. You have to be have the base programming access to read that CR2 and to generate an image. So there's efforts like DNG in photography. Like DNG is an open format, open source format. You know, anybody
yeah.
can read or write a DNG. And for now, most of the photography companies participate in creating a an algorithm to change their format into DNG.
Oh.
And so a lot of photographers do that. Some don't. Some just keep their format in the proprietary format. But much like anything, you look at it and you look at the history of format, like proprietary formats, proprietary things. What if that company disappears? What if tomorrow Canon no longer exists? Um,
Mm-hmm.
if every CR2 file that you have is no longer supported going forward by any reader program, you get to,
Mm,
another generation of computers. You can't open the application that you used to be able to read it in. Um, and these things happen in a vastly faster way than they used to before, the age of computing got to where it is now. Um, and I wonder at, like what we're actually going to leave behind. Like
mm,
we only have records from ancient Mesopotamia because we have files in a format that's non-destroyable, which is clay tablets with the cuneiform printed in it. Um,
yeah.
all the the Jewish and Christian and Muslim texts are deteriorating and rotting and dying. They will eventually not exist anymore. They will turn to dust. Um,
Yeah.
so how long do we have before our information turns to dust? Is it such a faster thing that we need to consider when we need to pay more attention when things like Philadelphia disappearing from Facebook happens? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think what might seem like a micro event like that couldn't ask some really big questions, like how permanent are the things that we make?
Eh,
At the same time,
oh, go ahead.
when
Sorry.
just at the same time, to go deeper into the philosophical thinking here, it's not like when we die, we take any of this stuff with us.
Sure.
So,
But a,
how,
a lot of a lot of the effort of life is creating
mm,
something that's going to outlive us, I guess. I don't know. I think about stuff that's
yeah,
going to outlive me all the time. Um,
yeah, for sure. Uh,
but we
yeah.
we were talking a couple weeks ago with another guest about like their history of their lifetime of work and how ephemeral it is because of the age we're at. Like
Mm,
their production company has produced pieces that just literally no longer exist because the websites that they were stored on went out of business and they had no opportunity to
mm,
recover it. Um,
yeah.
yeah.
It makes me think about there's this I forgot the name of the fish, but as part of its mating ritual, it creates this like incredibly complex and beautiful mandala-like
Mm,
creation
mm-hmm,
in the
mm-hmm.
sand for their potential mate.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's in sand. So within its creation, it's gone within like a day because of the sand moving it away and the water flowing. So I don't know. I don't know how we can, especially as like creators, as artists, as makers, think about the work we make in a way that doesn't necessarily have to be like, how does this live on beyond me? Is it enough for it to just live in this moment? And if it doesn't survive me, if it doesn't survive because a website crashes or because, God forbid, a fire starts and your physical work literally goes up in flames, or somebody destroys it, or something destroys it, or time destroys it, can we be satisfied knowing what we made, what we've created, just exists now?
And yeah, and there's always the idea that you've had it's puffer fish, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
And there's always the idea that I as an artist like, which is, if I affected at least one person, then that work has done its job.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Um, in an effort to have an effect on people, on what's going on, and in order to help people, there's a lot of this is I'm an atheist, by the way, so my apologies if I come off rude about this, but one of the only good things to me about religious practice is that almost all religions, support a spirit of community, and in fact, in the individual practice of religion, a lot of people seek opportunities to do community efforts to support their community, their fellow man, etc. Last Sunday, 4 days ago, Overbrook Presbyterian Church of Kensington had a one of their regular handouts of food and necessities for the people in Kensington experiencing homelessness. Um, they get a bunch of volunteers. They're mostly members of the church. Some of them aren't members of the church. In fact, I saw a post the other day, which was kind of funny to me, um, from a church leader who was sending an invite to a community event to their atheist friends, and then the atheist friend responded, "I would love to go to this, but is it open to atheists?" And the church leader responded, "Yeah, I actually send this to my atheist friends first because I find they respond faster." Um, so anyway,
Incredible.
um, but anyway, this church, they give out food, they give out some clothes that they've collected, they give out necessities like deodorant and soaps and razors and
That's
combs and that
awesome.
kind of thing. And they do it, I believe, once a quarter, so like every 3 months or so. They've been doing it regularly. And this came to my attention because of Victor Fiorello, writer for Philly Mag. I would like to call him a friend. I don't know if he calls me a friend, but he's a good guy. We don't see eye to eye on everything, but in we do see eye to eye on the fact that humans are humans. It's important to treat all humans as humans. Um, During their handout, Victor's kids were volunteering, and the streets department decided to clean up that section of the street at that specific moment. Victor Fiorello posted about this and not didn't request an apology so much as I think he should have requested a public apology. But
Yeah.
the streets department cleanup crew, uh, while food was being served, the cleaning crew used gas-powered leaf blowers to ostensibly clean the street. But aside from blowing water, trash, and used paraphernalia around to be picked up, they also blew the mix of waste onto the volunteers and homeless people. Um,
Oh my God.
yeah, like they didn't really, dampen the spirits of the volunteers. They kept doing their work. The homeless people stayed there because, there's food and good things for
Yeah.
them there. Um, but it did raise concerns amongst the parents and advocates that were there. I I've had some relatively negative comments about this. I personally think this is endemic of the change in leadership in City Hall. I think
Mm.
that the change in leadership in City Hall has opened the doors for groups of people who thought that things should go a different way, and they're now taking advantage of that. Um, I think the Parker administration isn't as interested in helping people because they're people as I am, perhaps. Well, I know they're not as interested in it as I am. I think that it's creating an opportunity for kind of an endemic problem within the administration and within all the service areas that, the city services don't just affect us. They affect everyone in the city, and so
Mm.
you know, uh, I'm of the opinion that they should be for everyone in the city. And
Yeah.
when I see something like this, I wonder how we can ameliorate it.
Um, it's a good question. I think, unfortunately, like outside of Philadelphia, if you take a look at the way that government has been structured in different cities, both in this country and around the world, the policies don't always line up with serving those that need the most help. Like it's I am a socialist, but I've also like noticed and historically speaking that a lot of governments that focus on socialist work, it often ends up not being in favor of like who actually needs the help and support. And I think it's because like we're constantly feeding into systems of power and like who is actually funding different parts of the government, um, and who the supporters are. It like I'm going to be talking in circles here, but sort of like neoliberal socialism comes to mind here, where it's like, yes, theoretically, we are for a more just society that's more equitable, and everyone gets the resources they need and people are treated like people. But realistically, what actually happens? Who actually benefits from the laws and the efforts to make a quote unquote more equitable society?
I the I think the problem becomes, in any I had this conversation with a friend of mine, and he was saying that it's the problem of humans. You get humans involved in anything, including religion. This actually started as a religious conversation, but you
Yeah.
get problems where humans screw things up. And my argument would be that it's a non-democratic problem, a non-democracy problem, because ostensibly, the leadership of the city are Democrats, they're liberals, ostensibly, like per
Yeah.
the letter
Yeah.
that follows their name in their posts on social media. Um, you know, they're just not. They're not in reality, and I think that becomes a problem anywhere that you get the realized idealized version of what it is you're looking for, because there's always going to be people that are not interested in doing the things the same way as other people are doing them. There's always going to be somebody, even in I run crews all the time with, lots of workers, and so there's always like three or four ideas about how to do something, even if you only have three or four people on the job. Um,
Yeah.
um, I think that's the problem. I think, like once you get to, you look at a socialist country, and almost all the time, the way they became a socialist country is by unification and concentration of the leadership into one, ostensibly one political belief. What
Hmm.
happens then is that they're not really all of that political belief. They just say they are so that they can get into power, and then what they actually believe in seems to be something entirely different. Um,
Yeah.
so,
I think, yeah. I think there's also such like a long scale, longer than I think we think about in terms of like liberal to conservative.
mm,
So if somebody identifies as a Democrat or a liberal, it's like, in what way? Like that is such a it's a big word, and it can encompass so many different
yeah,
things.
neoliberal Democrats think Joe Biden, think Hillary Clinton, think they're essentially conservatives by any political measure, but yeah, the idea of liberalism in America is not, not what the realistic ideal of liberalism is, and that's why I'm not a Democrat, but I'm the closest thing that I could be called is a progressive, but
Hmm.
people hate that too,
Yeah.
so people are like,
Yeah,
what,
yeah,
you want the world to progress? Yeah, no, sorry, I do actually. I would find that amazing.
yeah. Remember that show House of Cards?
Yeah.
Ugh, before Kevin Spacey
Yeah.
did some bad stuff.
There was a
Kevin
British version
Spacey.
before that. The British version
Oh,
is pretty good. Um,
yeah. But I did love the metaphor of that show of like we see politicians coming to power and using whatever party they need or want just to be in power. The name of the game is to be in power. Um, and also I feel like even in socialist countries we see people sliding away from technically what the party line should be doing. Like right now, Germany, for instance, is having a very familiar response to the pro-Palestinian protests and demonstrations that are being held. A lot of the people that are part of those protests or like calling out and speaking for Palestinian liberation are like being cracked down upon by the German government, which is a little scary considering the history of Germany. But Germany has touted itself as this incredible socialist paradise. And in some ways, they have been, right? Like, I think they've done a lot of things really well for their society. On the other hand, like, I don't think, I don't think there's any place in the world that fully lives up to who they say they are politically.
um, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I usually concentrate on America, so
Mhm.
I often have negative things to say about the U.S. government. Not
Yeah.
because I think that the U.S. government is bad, and like this is oftentimes where like I get annoyed because like the knee jerk jump to argument is, well, you hate America. No, I don't hate America. I just what my problem is I've bought into the propaganda so much that I actually believe America could be better than this.
Mhm.
I believe in an America that is idealized, and we'll probably never make that, but I do. I think that's probably, where I've gone wrong there. I think that the argument comes from like me and a conservative person believe in two different Americas that are idealized. They believe in the idealized history of America. I believe in the idealized future of America. Um,
Yeah.
so, at any rate, there. Speaking of America and socialism, and something that we're probably going to be told is a socialist agenda. Federal lawmakers are proposing a $1 billion per year for 5 year annual benefit to nonprofit theater, specifically nonprofit theater. Um,
Hmm.
and of course, like this would probably go to the big guys mostly, but like here in Philadelphia, benefits like this usually get passed around at least somewhat. Like over half of it goes to the big guys, and then the small folks get funded through the Philadelphia artists, organizations, which is nice. But I think this could be a good thing. This is one of the idealized futures of America that I've always been sold and actually believe in, is that, like the future of humanity is when we can produce enough output, economic or food or whatever energy output per human, that some humans can stop trying to chase the dream and just live the things that they find important. Um, um,
Yeah.
yeah. In Throwing back to native culture and clowning forms, the tricksters, the native clowns, the native jesters, they were often otherwise unemployed, um, and lived off of the I don't know what's the word for that, like the benefit of the upper class in
Community.
in their
Mm.
society. Yeah.
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 Like they have patrons.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you look at native cultures, there's in almost every native culture there's a trickster person, a person that embodies the trickster ideal. I know I don't know if you know this. I know I've talked about this before, but the a lot of my personality is wrapped up with the kind of trickster idea of the Northwest Raven. Um,
Hmm.
I find problems, and then when I find a problem, I don't stop poking at it until it's either fixed or I get, like assaulted. um, um,
That's very funny.
the and oftentimes my solution to a problem is not to solve the problem, but to actually, just keep poking at it and try and get it resolved by calling attention to it and making it worse sometimes before it gets better. Um, yeah, but the tricksters in Native American culture were, often relatively poor because they didn't do anything, like they didn't ostensibly do anything, they didn't do anything. They didn't farm, they didn't fish, they didn't their whole lives were, even if you look at European culture and European jesters, their whole lives were making fun of the people in power and like not
Yeah.
doing anything other than that, concentrating their lives on calling out the problems in society.
What a
Um,
dream.
right? But that's where society should go, right?
It
Shouldn't
should.
shouldn't shouldn't there be people, like artists are those
Yeah.
people, right?
Artists are those people. I think, well, if we take like a look at that part of history when artists could just be artists, they had patrons who were ridiculously wealthy, and the class divide is currently pretty wide, but it was way wider back then. Most people were in poverty. There were a select few that were generating an enormous amount of income. Um, and so like that, like artist patron relationship was a lot more possible because you had people who could like one person could support somebody else's entire livelihood, or a couple people could support somebody else's entire livelihood, even if it wasn't the most glamorous life. It was a life. um yeah, I do dream and hope for a future where I can just be an artist, where I can just perform and I can just write and teach. I like to teach as well. um but yeah, I would like to see that day come. And I think if we were to able to move to a system that funded more artists from like a government level. Right now we have the millions of grants and fellowships that one can apply for and usually get rejected from. But if we had more systems of actual support for artists to be able to feed themselves, to have a roof over their heads so that they can just focus on their work, that'd be pretty great.
Yeah, I often wonder where we would be as a society if we actually, like funded all the people that, like I was thinking about somebody was saying, output would stop if we had, like a universal basic income. Like they were like,
Okay.
universal basic income doesn't work, and I'm like, it does. It's worked in every experiment that anybody's ever done, but that's okay. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that there are people who work like 40, 50 hours a week, and then they go home and do what are considered hobbies that are really just science experiments or art or some other thing that actually advances society, and they're doing it on their free time, not getting paid for it, and actually having to pay from their other work to do these things that are actually advancing society. And I wonder, like, how fast, like battery technology, as an example, would get solved if you had all these like at-home scientists who could actually spend their time putzing around with, at-home science experiments. You know.
Exactly. Yeah, well, that's a very strange thing to say. I think if we had actually the time and space to work on the things we actually wanted to work on and not the things we're required to work on to pay rent, I, I don't know. I feel like we would evolve like at the speed of light. um, that sounds really nice. Now I'm
Speaking
dreaming about a future like that.
speaking of rent, so
Mm,
there's a national and local trend in housing, where rental affordability is tanking. Apparently, the recommended is to have like rent that's less than a third of your income. But it's something like, let me see. There was a number here, and I lost track of it. Uh, there is the number of cost burdened renter households, those spending more than 30% of their income on rent and utilities, reached a new high in 2022, impacting approximately 50% of renter households. That was 2 years ago, by the
wow.
way, and rent has done nothing but increase. I think it's gone up about 40% nationally in the last 2 years. Um,
Wow.
and housing hasn't gotten better either. Purchasing
Nope.
housing. Um, the National Association of Home Builders and Wells Fargo Housing Opportunity Index, the HOI, indicates that only about 37.7% of new and existing homes sold at the end of 2023 were affordable to families earning a median income in the US. That means that just slightly over one third of homes sold in the entire year of 2023 were affordable to half of the population.
Wow.
That means that gap that you were talking about is just getting bigger. Like it's just getting
Yeah.
bigger fast. Like because
Yes.
if you're not going to not have a home, so you're going to buy an unaffordable home, and if you buy an unaffordable home, you're spending more than you can, and you're not saving anything. Anyway,
Yeah, exactly.
um, I'm going to recognize it's 11:02. I don't want to take up too much of your time. So, any last thoughts? Any last things that you want to touch on? And then I'm gonna touch on the one topic I didn't touch on, which is the Corona Borealis nova that's coming up. But any last thoughts from you?
Hmm.
Anything you want people to know, or that you haven't expressed? I know I did a lot of talking this episode. I'm sorry.
No, no, it's okay. It's been a good conversation. I think something I want people to know is we talked about a lot of things on this episode in the ways in which the world is suffering or broken or fragmented. And I know in my community and what I've read online and what I've just seen out on the streets, people are so distressed and unhappy and feel a sense of hopelessness for the future, for the current moment. Um, I think that is one of the best reasons to tap into a practice like clowning because what it really does is it isolates you in this moment right now and asks you, how can you find pleasure and fulfillment in what is directly in front of you? You can't change what's happening in the world outside of you. You can't make more funds magically appear so that everybody is equitable in the society. You can't stop all war. You can't do any of that yourself in this moment. But what you can do is like play with a ball on the ground, or you can notice the way that the sun hits the trees and find that so beautiful. Or you can like just, I don't know, find like a string and play with it like a dog. There's so many ways you can experience joy in a moment with the smallest amount. And I think everyone just needs to take a clown class. That's what I think.
um, I like the idea of demystifying um, the world through clown, through this practice that has been around forever, that people don't realize, and that there are people still doing it. I think that people don't realize that they are still doing it. And for what it's worth, I think the overarching theme of this season of this show has been that people have an innate need to express themselves through something. To have had take a moment to get outside of your "I need to pay this bill" mentality and just screw around with something for 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be good, in
Yeah.
an objective sense. It has to be good for you. That's all.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think people talk a lot about like you should meditate or go for a walk or do like a self-care ritual. But I think sometimes when your mind is so bombarded and overloaded with all that's wrong in your world and the world, it's really hard to force yourself to relax. So don't try to relax, just try to play. Try to play with
Try to
something,
play.
engage
Yeah.
your mind and body in a way that feels good and actually takes you away from the worry and the anxiety about the future and the world.
I agree. Thank you for joining us
Yeah.
this week. If you do you want to stick
Thanks for
around while I
having
talk
us.
about the supernova, or do you got to go?
Yeah, yeah, I can stick around
Okay.
for the supernova.
And thank you for everyone who watches every week. I really appreciate it. I just want to, let you know, since it's 11:06, feel free to stop the live stream. You can come back, watch it later. It'll be an instant replay as soon as I wrap up here. Hit like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. We are on every Wednesday at 10 a.m. And let's see, next Wednesday is Rhonda B. Goldfine, co-founder of Safe House, and they'll be talking about being a lawyer and some of the things happening in Kensington. I think it'll be a good conversation. Hopefully, I won't just agree with them too much that I don't really actually have a conversation. It's that's one of the hard parts I'm sure it's a hard part for you as a journalist as well. Like
Mm.
when you agree entirely with your interview subject, and then you can't. How do you? Well, we can just talk about this thing, but I don't really have any counterpoint for you. um,
I think you just have to focus on the questions.
yeah.
When I'm talking to someone, I'm like, oh gosh, we agree on every single thing, and they've just touched on like a divisive point. Um, Instead of saying like, yeah, or I totally feel the same way, I just try to stop. I try to not to use affirming phrases,
Mm.
and I just like focus on asking more questions. Um, and so it becomes just like a sort of Socratic method situation.
In international news, because this will you'll see this from around the world. In T Coronae Borealis, there's a recurring nova, a brown dwarf orbiting a pulsar, or no, sorry, a white dwarf. And every once in a while, the brown dwarf releases enough material into the white dwarf that the white dwarf then cools down and then eventually explodes in a small nova. It's not a supernova. A supernova is where like the entire body gets destroyed after the nova. This is just a nova, which is where like excess gases and pressure get released in a sudden eruption. Um, this nova is expected to happen within the next few months in the T Coronae Borealis system. You can see it if you look up in the sky and you can find the Hercules constellation and look a little bit to the right of it. And it will happen at one point at that point for about 24 hours it'll be brighter than the North Star, and then it'll dim down. It'll still be brighter than most things in the sky for a few months. So somewhere in the next few months we'll have what looks like to most people a new star in the sky. um, and I think that's cool. I don't know. I think all of the celestial mechanics things are cool. I think that the cool thing about this to me is that it happened a long time ago, and we can predict that it's going to happen again. You know, this happens approximately every 80 years. They can look back in historical records and like find references to it going back um, thousands of years. They can see that this has happened over and over again, and have a clock on it that's about every 80 years. But from the events that happened within the last 200-300 years, people have actually looked at the star, directly examined it, and noticed that it gets dimmer right before it goes supernova. So they've actually in observations directly observed that it has gotten dimmer. So they're expecting it to actually happen within the next few months. So we get a better timeline of it nowadays than we would in the past. Um,
Cool.
yeah, I you know I don't know. This is interesting to me from the perspective of I don't know that space exploration, space observation has any value to society, yet we support it. You know, like we spend plenty of money on it. I mean, not plenty. I think we could actually spend more. I'm one of those idiots, but um,
Why do you think it doesn't have a impact or significance to society?
I think it's easy to say it doesn't. I think it
Mm.
actually does. I mean, personally, I think it has a huge impact on society. Um, but I think it's easy to say what has, you know, Copernicus ever done for me. um,
Yeah.
you know, Copernicus doesn't put food on my table. Galileo didn't, you know, didn't come up with a better economic engine.
Mm.
You know,
Hmm.
Newton wasn't a disruptor of industry. to use modern terms.
Yeah, but I think if we want to relate it back to the to economics, understanding how our universe works affects the way that we approach agriculture, weather, all this stuff, which in turn affects economics.
Sure, sure. And there's tons of other things that, like space exploration, space observation affect as far as economically, there's tons of research and development and new learning that's done through attempting to observe outside of our global sphere. Um,
Hmm.
I
Yep.
think it's really cool. I think it's really important, but I think it's easy to
Yeah.
say it's not.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I wonder. And here's the tie-in. I think it's easy. I think art is really super important and affecting globally and huge impact on the economy. And I think that's where we do our research into social concepts and ourselves. Um, and where we figure out new ways of being as people.
Hmm.
And I but art is easy to say. It's easy for the common person to say art isn't important. Art doesn't pay my bills. Art doesn't. It's a. I've not run into recently anybody who would say art is a drain on society, but I did when I was a kid have
Mm.
people that said that. Um,
Wow.
there was a my mom was an art director um, when I was in school and a creative director later, um, mostly for advertising. And so at a random PTA thing, uh, parents were introducing themselves and saying what they did, and my mom introduced herself as an art director for at the time Kmart. Um, and another mom said, "Well, what do you do?" And my mom said, "Well, I, you know, decide how advertisements are going to look, and I collect all the things that need to be collected, whether it be photography or writing or whatever, and then I arrange them on the page, and um, you know, I have a team of people that do all these various arts and I use my artistic practice to do that. Well, what do you actually do? What do you contribute? What do you mean? What do you contribute to society? Like my husband makes widgets. Well, I make art. So you don't do anything. What? And it's very easy. It's very easy for people to discount the importance of art as much as it
And
is, you know.
and yet when they are feeling sad, bad, mad, any kind of potentially negative emotion, what are the things that people turn most to? Their favorite TV show, their favorite song, their favorite album. They go to a concert to see a band play. They go see a movie. They go see a play. Interesting.
And also, I mean, even though people hate advertising, could you imagine a world without even that base level of art everywhere? Like, it would be so
Yeah.
boring. Like,
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I
know,
have a complicated relationship to advertising, but I do think there have been some really beautiful advertisements in our time. And if you go to like the advertisements that have won awards, like actual awards in different marketing competitions and such over the years, some of them are genuine pieces of like performance art or cinematography, and it's like it's good that this hasn't been made with pure AI. This is actually
right,
a
right.
there's actually been human thought and feeling behind this.
Yeah. And having been a photographer for advertising before, I can tell you that I never thought of it as just purely advertising. I always thought of it as how am I going to express this thing? And the thing that I wanted to express wasn't really buy this product, it was always something else.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, advertisements make you think. They make you sometimes change behavior or change opinion.
Mm-hmm.
They do quite a bit for the world.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, look at I don't know if you're old enough to know them, but the United Colors of Benetton campaigns were like some of the most divisive but also
Oh,
politically
yeah.
active campaigns that are advertising ever.
Right.
I kind of miss them.
Yeah.
I kind of miss that kind of thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for your enlightening perspectives on theater and cultural identity. And thanks for being here this week. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for
Feel
having
free
me.
to join us anytime. And if you would like me to join you on your podcast, let me know.
Will do. Thank you, James. Truly
Uh,
appreciate it.
yeah, no problem. I'm gonna go to one up on me, outro the show. Feel free to stick around in the chat if you'd like to talk for a minute. And like I said, welcome back anytime. So please let Meg know if you'd like to jump back on at some point in the future. The link's always the same. So keep an eye on the topics.
Thank you.
All right.
Will do.
Have a good day.
Bye.
And thank you to the listeners for joining us today. From the local dynamics in Philadelphia to the expanses of the cosmos, today's topics remind us of our diverse connections and the power of community and art in shaping our world. Keep exploring, questioning, and engaging, and join us next week for more coffee break chat. Have a good rest of your week, everybody.